Well, I think what attracts most businesses is the affordability. Can they afford to build, can they afford a business in a community without being charged so much? Impact fees, I believe in deferred impact fees. If, you're not, Chuck Produce will be building, he's not gonna have a lot of people coming over to shop, so I think we should defer that until the time that it's built. I personally, impact fees, I'm not supportive of impact fees. I understand the need to bring something to the community. You got to give back to the community, and somebody's got to pay for the roads and stuff. But hopefully those that are working, the 80 people that work for the company, would be able to bring money and income into the city to begin with. I think cities today should do everything possible to help business thrive. And if that's a deterrence for 80 and 80 fathers who wanted to protect their families and help their families out, if that's a deterrence, then I think that we need to drop those fees. We make exceptions for other people, and I think that the county, that's not a city issue, it's a county issue, but our cities may face the same kind of situation, and I believe that we need to take look at those kind of things and not try to penalize people for wanting to bring jobs to the community. Well, I like to relate it to my own personal life, my own home, and everybody should, be able to relate to that. If somebody in the household loses their job, then you have to rearrange your finances at home. We have hard economic times now where we have a lot of people in the city that are losing their jobs, and we have homes that are being foreclosed. I think we need to take that into consideration, step back and said, what are we spending that we don't need to be spending? The first thing I would do is look at what we're spending that's unnecessary and cut those spending first, and try to make it work out to where we're not overtaxing people. As far as that 5%, that's specifically to the baseball thing, and I'm totally against that. I don't think that other businesses should be penalized because some business wants to come in and make money and don't have the money for it. I think that's far-reaching, and I think it's not fair to the other businesses. It's ridiculous. I'm totally against that whole issue, and I'll tell you why. My daughter is a city planner, an urban planner, and she made sense when she said, Mom, the biggest problem with planning today is that we try to take one size fits all and apply it to all. We take something that may work in Portland and try to apply it to Vancouver, when in fact, if you were to be true to the community, you should look at that community and what it's about and work in that community to to enhance that community. So if you have a community that walks a lot, then you would build that community up to accommodate more walking. If you have a community, which Fourth Plain is, a community where people rely on bus transportation to get 2-3 blocks down to go shopping. Putting BRT in there, bus rapid transit, is the most ridiculous idea because bus rapid transit, in order to qualify as bus rapid transit, they have to remove 7 stops in between. So the little old lady or the disabled guy who normally hops on the bus to go down 3 blocks, all of a sudden now has to get on this fast speeding bus. It's not going to stop until the next 7th block. And it doesn't serve that community well. If it were San Francisco or someplace else that rely on getting from point A to point B in a hurry, okay. But Fourth Plain, the community in Fourth Plain does not call for that. They are a community that uses transportation to go shopping, to go to school, to take their kids to the store down the street. And so I don't see bus rapid transit as serving that community. I see bus rapid transit serving somebody's idealistic way of how transportation should be. And that's not fair to that community, and it's not fair to taxpayers to have to bear that burden. So I am not for what they're doing there. I think they have buses that works well. As a matter of fact, I wanted to understand the system myself because you hear all these numbers put out there. I rode the bus for 2 straight days from Cascade Park, Fisher's Landing, all the way down to 4th Plain to see what kind of traffic there were to justify whether they could justify bus rapid transit. And I found out just the opposite. It confirmed my suspicion. People were not using it to get to Portland. People were not trying to rush through 4th Plain. They were using it to get from, 1 block to 3 blocks to whatever. And I think this is not serving the people. This is serving those who support this kind of thing. So I would rethink that all over again. It's not necessary. The buses, by the way, that went through, they weren't full. There were hardly anybody in there. So there's no justification for putting this expensive, bus rapid transit that does not serve the community. So I'm not for it at all, not at this point. C-Tran could serve people better. See, I drive a 1999 vehicle, and because it works for me, and because, yes, I can go out and get a loan. I can go out and apply for, 2%, 3%, 4% loan, whatever, a low percentage loan. I could qualify for one of those. But why put myself in debt when I already have a working vehicle? C-Tran was to serve, you hear their messages all the time, and their messages about taking care of those disadvantaged folks and taking care of this. Why are they wanting to put premium services for people who aren't even paying into the taxes themselves? I think we need the transportation for those, and I'm grateful they're available. But at some point, we have to reason what's going on here. If taxpayers like myself and others having to put aside to, okay, I'm not driving this lovely car with great mileage, I'm driving an SUV because that's what I was stuck with, then you know what, until I can afford to buy a smaller vehicle, besides the second vehicle that I got, I'm stuck with this car for a while until I can afford it. And I think the government needs to start thinking that way. I would love one of those hybrid cars. I heard they were good. They sound great, or you can't really hear them. But I can't afford it. And I think government needs to come to that point where you say, we'd love to have that. As a matter of fact, instead of light rail, let's use helicopters. Because it's faster, it's easier, it crosses better, and it doesn't deal with traffic. But can we afford it? We need to start cutting back, start making sense, and start, taking care of people the way that we should. And that's with common sense. And be a reliable vehicle without having to add all those special things. As a matter of fact, they made a big boo-boo at one point where they spent hundreds and thousands of dollars converting the buses into biodiesel because they said biodiesel was the way to go. And we're gonna save the environment, this is great. And the next thing you know, everything was messed up. So they had to go resort back to diesel. And those are bad decisions that are being made. It's because, here again, somebody else, somewhere, are making the decisions for the taxpayers. Bad decisions. Absolutely not. This is the reason why I'm running. About a year and a half ago, I challenged the city on their validity of having light rail here. This is another one of those projects that somebody else is running, and it has nothing to do with the people. Back in 1995, people voted. This issue came about, and citizens said, no way, Jose. No light rail, because it's not justified. 67% of the people voted against it. Today, they want to take this thing and shove it down our throats without a vote. Bypass us, sure, why not? And then you have elected officials who we supported, who we voted in, who should really be servants of the people, that are saying we don't need their vote. That's why they elected me, to make this $8.7 billion decision without their input, even though light rail and the CRC project is going to destroy this community. There is no justification for putting light rail here. They want to put 15,000 parking spaces in downtown Vancouver. And this is what I liken it to. You know, coming from an island, one of the things that we are accustomed to is before you enter somebody's home, you take your shoes off at the door. And it's just saying, respect, don't bring the dirt in. And I think this is the thing that's being forced on Vancouver, is that we don't want your cars in Portland. So before you enter Portland, you take your cars off. But in the meantime, those people downtown, the poor folks downtown, are going to suffer with carbon monoxide, higher crime, vehicles in and out of there. This has not been thought out properly. This is one of those things where it's inconvenient for the people. And it's wrong. If anything else, we need more bridges. We need more ways to cross the Columbia River. So I am not supportive of this project as it stands. Do I consider it bad sprawl? Well, if it is, I live in a sprawled area because I live in Cascade Park on the east side, East County, and so do many other voters. No, I do not discourage. Okay, I'm sorry, you have to ask that question again because it was kind of confusing. I mean, there were many questions to that one question.
Okay.
So the first question was the sprawl.
First question was about sprawl.
Do I support sprawl?
And then the second question's about 192nd Avenue Bridge.
Do I support that bridge? Because there's like 3 questions in there, right?
There's 2. Is it sprawl?
Okay, is it sprawl and do I support 192nd? Okay.
Yeah.
I do not consider it sprawl. I consider it growth. I consider it that the land is developing to accommodate more people moving into the community, which is a good thing, which is what everybody wants. As a matter of fact, I live in the East County, and I resent the fact that anybody calls sprawl like it's a bad thing. I love my community. I love where I live. As far as a bridge there, I believe that the most common sense thing to do is build the 192nd bridge. Because as it stands now, we only have 2 ways to get across that river. And if they build up I-5, put tolls there, they're going to be forced to put tolls on I-205, or else they're going to send all the traffic going over there to avoid people, wanting to avoid paying tolls, which is going to back up the airport. So I could just see people having to spend 4 or 5 hours to head out to the airport to accommodate bad decisions, TSA, and whatever else out there, because now we've made it inconvenient for people. So unless we have a 3rd or a 4th bridge, we're not doing justice to the people, to the taxpayers especially. And I think that if we add another bridge there, that we would have a bigger community, then more people would move. Because traffic is a big deal for a lot of people. And this is why I'm not for the I-5 bridge, the project right now as it stands, because I-5 is overcapacitated as it is. And they're putting the same amount of lanes there, and everybody that drives I-5 can attest that the bridge is not the problem. It's the traffic on the other side. It's Portland's unwillingness to accommodate the tax-paying citizens from Vancouver. So a third bridge and a fourth bridge makes more sense, and it's cheaper than what they're proposing right now. Well, again, I do not support having to keep borrow to build. It kind of reminds me of people in general, families in general during holidays. It's kind of interesting that most families tend to pinch pennies. And then when it comes to Christmas time, all the credit cards come out and they start spending like crazy. And then after Christmas, they feel trapped. Next thing you know, they're losing their homes or filing bankruptcy or doing something because they made a spur-of-the-moment decision. I think we need to think things out. Courtney, the things that we face today are things that other cities have faced and have had solved. I think the best thing that Vancouver can do is, rather than listening to the radical ideas of how a community should be and not enhancing the community for what it is, I think they ought to look at other cities that are thriving without debt, without so much debt. I mean, there's a city in Canada that actually has no debt. They have money in reserves. And I think the interesting thing is, speaking of reserves, is the person that wants more money, or the business or the government agency out there that wants more money, is the one that has reserves. C-Tran has about 45 million, the last time I read, in reserves. And they're asking for tax, and they're asking for more money. So why don't they use the money they have in reserves? Going out there and borrowing again is not the way to go. We've got to cut back our spending. And we shouldn't do it in safety. We shouldn't threaten the communities by saying, if you don't pay this tax, we're going to cut your police off, we're going to cut your fire off, we're going to close fire stations. That's wrong. That should be the number one thing. Those things are the number one thing that should be considered: fire and police. Because without safety in a community, you may as well just shut your doors. Nobody wants to live in a place where it's very dangerous and it's unsafe. So that should be the priorities: life. We got to cut back on our spendings. And I know that there was recently when Mr. Madore had made a comment about paying for a bridge, and I think it was Mr. Micah from the Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C., had said, well, how would you build that bridge? You've got to raise taxes, you've got to get tolls and everything else. And Mr. Madore said, well, use cash. And everybody laughed. Cash? Are you crazy? Our country is in so much debt today because of that mentality. We don't even think cash anymore. We think debt, 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 debt. And I'm really sad looking at my 2 grandchildren that are just little babies and thinking these little guys are strapped with debt already. They haven't even, my granddaughter's not even walking, and she's already strapped with debt. This is unfair. Our generation was not left with so much debt. There were some responsible people in between times, but this is wrong to put these babies in debt before they could even walk. My name is Josephine Wentzel, and the whole reason why I decided to run was during the 1.5 years of time that I have been going to City Council and addressing the issues of unfairness to this community and the lack of, citizen input for light rail and everything. We had been called names, we were laughed at, gavel down, told it was their meeting. This is the city council. And when I realized that nobody was really standing up for the citizens except maybe one person, and that's Jeannie Stewart, I realized that our city was in trouble. We need leadership in this community. We need people that'll think on their feet. We need people that would be fair, that are there to represent the needs and represent the important things in this community. There are many more ways of accomplishing things in a community than raising taxes. We can do that through volunteerism. We can enhance our police and fire forces with reserves. We've got a lot of military coming back from the war that were trained, and they were, that would be willing to give back to the community. We have to start thinking outside the box and think about our community as a whole and what's good for all of us. And we've got to protect our children from the debt that we were strapped with. And my name is Josephine Wentzel. I'm asking you for your vote. And thank you for your time. And I thank US Digital and Couv.com for making this possible. Thank you.